Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Finding Brave. Kathy Caprino here. Wow. I think this is coming to you January 14th. So we're over the holidays. Now we're in the, new year, new you. I hope your January is going well. And I wish I could have a little, what do you call it? Crystal ball to see what our country is like in January after having gone through, all of us have gone through an incredible time with COVID, with the elections that were hard for probably almost everybody in some way. So I hope your January is starting out fantastically. And I am so excited and honored to have our guest, Ed Frauenheim, today. In the middle of amazing things you're doing, Ed, you took the time to be here. And I'm so, so very grateful. And
It's
we
my pleasure,
are,
Kathy. Thank you.
thanks, Ed. And we're talking about something that I'm so rabidly interested in, mainly because, transparently speaking, my world is women at work. And here I'm talking to someone who's focused probably as much, if not more, on men at work and masculinity. And what we're talking about today, how we must reinvent masculinity at work and how we do it. And I think this is absolutely the flip side of the book, The Most Powerful You, and all the work around what women are going through. It's not a one sided coin. If there's change on this side, there's got to be change on that side, or it needs to wholeness is where we're going, I think, in general. But I want to tell you about Ed because what a background he has. And then we're going to get into why do we have to reinvent masculinity. So Ed Frauenheim is a writer and speaker who's focused on the workplace, technology, and culture matters for more than 25 years. His writing has been featured in Fortune Inc., USA Today. I even shared that, which was an incredible piece. He has co-authored 4 books. Good grief. The latest is Reinventing Masculinity, The Liberating Power of Compassion and Connection, co-written by Dr. Ed Adams, a past president of the American Psychological Association's division devoted to the treatment of men and boys. Wow. In the book, the two Eds tell the story of how we are evolving from a cramped, unhealthy, outdated masculinity to one that frees us all to build a better, more inclusive future. Thank you again, Ed. I can't wait. But I want to do this.
Hmm.
I have a Finding Brave prep sheet that my guests fill out, and sometimes they write something that I want to literally verbatim share as a kickoff, and that's okay with you, Ed, right?
Yes.
Here it is. The brief description of what we're talking about, Ed has written. In the flatter, faster, fairness focused world that's taking shape today, we need a new model for how men show up and lead in organizations. The traditional confined masculinity steers men to be rigid, cold, and isolated in a work world now calling for flexibility, warmth, and connection. A liberating masculinity is emerging and can be seen in some of today's leading business executives and sports leaders. It's a male ethos that enables men to break out of the emotional straitjacket many of us grew up with, to reckon with privilege and power we have long benefited from, and to succeed in new and inclusive ways. I get a little choked up when I read this. I
Hmm.
wonder why. You can tell me, Ed. You can be my therapist. I think maybe whenever we're talking about what rigid gender stereotypes do to people, it is being in a rigid straitjacket that you can't break out of. So let's
Yeah.
let's start there, Ed. How why are we calling now for a reinvention of masculinity? What have you seen? Why is it so important now?
Thanks, Kathy. I think it's because this older way, this more conventional, what we call confined way of being a man, it no longer works, and it's proving to be unhealthy and dangerous even in the workplace and then and beyond in society. And you highlighted the 3 Fs we talk about in terms of kind of naming what's going on in the business community and in the broader world. Things are faster now, so you can't rely on those top-down chains of command where information comes in from the bottom and it gets steered up to the top, and some guy usually makes a decision, sends that message back down. That is too slow
Wow.
for the rapid pace of work, you need people throughout your organization sensing and responding to signals in the marketplace and opportunities and threats. Uh, with respect to the flatter piece, that it's many organizations are flattening their hierarchies, making more distributed power arrangements so that you can have ad hoc teams that tackle a topic. You are giving people that are lower down in the traditional hierarchy the authority to choose how to proceed or to innovate new products or services. Again, that doesn't speak to a barking boss approach to leadership, where you're kind of just about commanding and controlling. It's more about persuading and listening and collaborating. And then this fairness focus piece really speaks to the Me Too movement, to the Black Lives Matter movement, where it's not okay to be kind of blind to our privileges as guys, especially white guys, straight guys, and in the ways we've kind of, you know, really limited the potential of women and people of color historically. We have got to show up as aware of our privilege, as allies to others, and we know that that's not just good morally, but it's good for business. With more and more research showing that you get the best results when you have that diverse and inclusive culture.
I love it. I got questions here now. I'm really interested, just as we were sharing earlier, when I present the stuff that I think is self-evident, I'm always amazed at some of the vitriolic hatred that comes back at me. Like if I talk about feminism and why people like it or hate it, and if I talk about at the core of it, it's about equal rights. There are so many people that either think we already have equal rights or women are emasculating men and it's turning into a horrible world. There are certain things we kind of take for granted that every human being deserves the equal rights with every other human being. Some things are just not accepted that way. But I'd love to know when you said, it's clear, it's showing up. This is not working, this outdated view of masculinity. And, you talked about business and leadership, but I also want to hear the piece about personally, if you don't mind. Um, what is going wrong there, and we've talked about this. I interviewed Terry Real, who's a renowned best-selling author and couples therapist, and he's an expert on the patriarchal dynamic. I think it
Mhm.
works for no one when and again, I've said this a lot, but I'll say it again for people who didn't hear that episode. In a patriarchal world, you split yourself in half. There's the masculine and the feminine. We all know what it means, rigidly, stereotypically speaking. The masculine is strong, invulnerable, decisive, dominant, makes decisions. The feminine is soft, malleable, accommodating, pleasing. So I think, would you agree? You wrote the book on it, but we're not just talking about how to lead in a business. We're talking about how to approach living. Would you
Yeah,
agree with that piece?
I definitely do, and you spoke to that personal element to it. A big reason that I co-wrote this book uh, is a personal experience with not really fitting that patriarchal man mold very well. I grew up
Interesting.
skinny when you're supposed to be
Buff.
strong, muscular guy. I lost by one fist fight in sixth grade, Kathy, when you're supposed to be the dominant,
Shoot.
be able to beat up other people. And then when I got to the work world, at that point, the masculine model is rise to the top of the heap. Climb over other people, get to the top of the corporate ladder. And I did not have a conventional career like that. I managed one person for one day. I may have the shortest management record in history, and so
Well, wait, you've
I've struggled
managed
with this
many
stuff.
projects and many things. I think you're not even seeing your own your management prowess. We
Yeah,
don't, right?
and when you look at it in this newer way, yes, I'm one of my my
Gifts.
bosses called me the collaboration king, because I
See?
love working with people.
Right.
But in that kind of traditional model that was the one that I grew up with, that's where all the status was. It didn't work very well for me.
I see. So you had that. All right. So talk to me about, in general, what is the pushback that you hear? Because I love to hear what happens in people's minds when they hear you say it's not working. I think some people are going to go, well, who are you to say it's not working? I'm doing just fine running my business the way I'm running it. What is the
Yeah,
pushback? What do you hear about when people say, I don't like this? No, we don't need it.
yeah. Well, I would say a couple things. One, when we published that essay in USA Today, and just for a bit more context, that was we were noting that masculinity was on the ballot really in the recent U.S. election, where you had Donald Trump representing this more conventional, confined masculinity, where you're supposed to be what you just described earlier, Kathy, like dominant, aggressive. Uh,
Take no
um,
blip, take
yeah, and it's more about always competing, and winning is everything. Not much emotion, or especially not empathy. And on the other side, Joe Biden represented what we would call more of a liberating masculinity, where you can still be, strong and able to succeed in competition when you need to, but it builds on that to say you can also be in other roles, like the caregiver.
right. I
The
mean, he
way he cares
cried
for other
about his
people.
son or
Yes,
kissed his son on the forehead when he joined him on stage. This is
yeah,
not stuff you see usually of a
yeah.
male leader.
And that's we think the emerging model where he's opening up the whole realm of emotion, right? I can be empathetic
Mhm.
to this kid who stutters. I can be sharing grief with people. This like he hasn't walled off his grief. He's gone through it, with the loss of
Wow.
his first wife and daughter. So, well, one of the reactions of that piece was like someone in the comments in USA Today's Twitter feed, I think it was like, you got he called my co-author a wuss. Someone said that, and
Aren't we
it's
called
like, well, how do you know what
snowflakes
my
or
co-author's
you
like?
baby, you emotional, whatevers, right?
Yeah, and so I think that that shows to me the
Wuss.
power of that confinement. That we can't imagine another way, where we're not even saying it's wrong to be, you fit, to be someone who stands on principle, to be able to succeed in a competitive contest, but it's not everything, And so when we put
Right.
things, there's more, and what my co-author Ed has found in his psychological practices, so many guys that by the time they get in their 50s and 60s just feel empty.
Yeah.
They don't have a relationship with their wife very well, or with their kids. They don't have meaning in their jobs. They've just kind of followed this provider protector path, stoic. And it really inspired me to work on this book as well, to say there's a lot more out there.
I love this. I think every woman listening to this is going to laugh when and nod her head. But I have an example of this. I am so floored by, and I don't mean to, cement a rigid stereotype, but every man in my life, including my son or any man I ever know, they'll go out and see a friend who they haven't seen in a year, and they come back. So how's Mark? He's good. What's his job? I don't know. Where's he living? I don't know. How's his girlfriend? Don't know. How do you not know? What the heck did you talk about? I mean,
Sports, maybe.
what? And, every woman is going to laugh. But do you think that's part of it, that men, boys are also not encouraged to ask a probing question? I mean, this sounds,
Yeah,
I don't know
I
what
think,
I'm
yeah,
saying, but
there is, that is, again, this, we would call it like a cage of this philosophy, that you can't have a emotionally rich conversation and a relationship, because then you start getting into this dangerous territory of seeming feminine, like you said at the start, or homosexual, which is even more taboo. Like that you could become
wow.
across as gay if you're like really caring about your friend. And but I think that it's changing. I have a lot of, several really rich friendships that I've developed, and I'm really grateful that they have pushed me to become more emotionally vulnerable and deep over time. But even some of the guys I don't know as quite as well, but that I've reconnected with from my high school and junior high, they're going in these directions too. Even though I haven't been in great touch with them, but I think there is, and you see it in the culture. Shows that, like the Schitt's Creek, and the kind of emotional depth that
Unfolding.
like a Johnny Rose is developing, or shows, Roland and Johnny in friendship, and David and Patrick. So these are all inside baseball terms from the show, but there's movement, I think, in this direction, where guys are going to have deeper relationships, and it's starting in the schools, Kathy, with kids learning, socio emotional learning techniques.
Yeah.
So my son and his friends are much more clear with each other and open than I think I was back at his age at 17.
I was talking to my son who's 23 about this because we live together now because of COVID, and I was a former therapist, as you know. I talk a lot about narcissism, which is everywhere, really. And he now goes, "Yeah, boy, that guy's a narcissist, or that woman is a narcissist." And we're not trying to just label everyone, but um, I was talking to him and my daughter about why are younger people now seemingly much more in touch with psychological and emotional issues and well-being and meditation than my generation. I'm 60. There was nothing about your emotional well-being, about what you felt. Where would we get access to that? And my mom and dad were traditional Greek and Italian, and in fact, I think when I did grow up, when I cried over something, that really freaked them out. And I learned, I mean, I really think I was like the son that my father didn't have. So I just want to say, first of all, thank goodness for these younger generations that in many ways have much more access to what it is to be a whole person and to question this stuff, right? Would you agree, Ed?
Totally. And I think you posed a kind of a question of why is this happening? I mean, or I'd love to throw an
Yes,
idea out
please
there
do.
along those lines. I think part of what's happening is it's greater care in how they're handling relationships on the playground, say, where we used to have that, bullies are going to rule on the playground. There's a might makes right, and maybe later on, kind of whoever's the jocks kind of can call the shots. Whereas, when my son and daughter were, they went to public elementary school, and it was, we're not going to let bullying go
Yeah.
un unaddressed. We're going to have conflict resolution. We're
Wow.
going to figure stuff out. Um,
Wow.
so that gets kind of nipped in the bud a little bit, and people realize that bullying and that's sort of like, I'm going to have to follow this patriarchal order and be a lieutenant, and push the crap onto the people below me. It's not okay. And so I think that's part of the answer. I think part of the answer is greater and greater acceptance of mental health as real, and the issues around there, like the work you've done in your profession, Kathy, where it's not nearly the stigma it was, little by little. And the COVID situation is in some ways a gift along those lines, where or so many organizations, especially the ones that best workplaces that I work with, that Great Place to Work, where their leaders are acknowledging mental health challenges in their own families.
Right.
They're talking about all the additional resources around meditation and counseling that may be needed, because people are stressed out in ways that they never have been. So I think that there's a lot of
Mhm.
factors, but I'm hopeful about where we're going in
You
this
just bring
regard.
up a point too. I always want to look for silver linings. That's just who I am. And while COVID has given us a lot of loss, I think when I see my friends who are married and had traditional, kind of more traditional marital relationships. The husband used to leave a Monday morning. He was a management consultant. Comes home at Friday, not in the fabric of the kids' lives except weekends. And the wife did everything. I'm seeing what they're learning from each other. They're learning, wow, that ain't easy what you've got going on. And, the husband is seeing what the wife is dealing with 3 kids, 4 kids, 2 kids. And the deal is, I don't think you develop empathy for something you don't see.
Hmm.
I mean, we can imagine, but I think when you really see it, a lot of people, for instance, who don't even believe in Black Lives Matter don't think there's systemic oppression. Well, have they spoken to a Black person? No, they're in an insular world. I think that what we've got here is we're all seeing each other's realities and realizing, wow, that's a problem. What you've been having to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
What I'm
I
talking
think
about?
that's a great point, and I think that's true for me in my relationship with my wonderful wife, who's done a lot more of the domestic chores.
Right.
And while I've been here, I'm like, oh my God, there's more dishes. Like, where do those come from? We have to cook again. We have to feed these two teenagers again.
Right?
It's nonstop.
You're
And so,
starting
like,
to see what it is for her, and she's starting to see more maybe what it is for you. I love it. Okay, so um the pushback hasn't been as vitriolic in your world as it is for me, I think. Nobody's going,
not
"Shut
as
up, you
much.
dumb." Nobody is, are they?
Thankfully not. I mean, at least I haven't
Oh,
seen that exactly yet, and I'm sure it may happen. I know that there are pioneers in this work around a better masculinity, that have been more involved in these kind of battles, especially on social media,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that
So
can be a
you're
real
not on
wild
there. You're
west.
not on Twitter, are you? Probably.
I am, but not
Yeah.
super uh, aggressively, or don't have a million followers. But I hope that what I hope is, and tell me if you think this is true. Like,
Mhm.
there's a lot, there's a coalition of the willing. There's a lot of people that
Mm,
are kind of, I think, hungry for what you've said in your book, that we need to really kind of look at these power gaps and find ways to, have a more equitable organization. And I think that's true for guys and for women. And so I'm hopeful to kind of find those folks that are, curious, and they might have been quote unquote woke if they were born 20 years later.
yes. I want to say one thing, then I want to get to your 5 C's, which I'm thinking are about how we reinvent masculinity. Yeah. Um, I want to say one reason I've moved to working almost exclusively with women is the men won't do the inner work. They won't do it. And at first I thought, what the hell's going on here? Excuse my French. Is it laziness? No, it's that I feel, tell me what you think. They they don't know how to access the internal. They don't know how to do it, and it's too scary. Would you
I think
agree?
that's right. Yeah, and it's also because we were told not to go there. I think it's
What were
not
you
just that.
told, because you'd be made fun of or you're going to be a wuss or weak, or
Yeah,
it was that?
exactly. It starts with the boys don't cry,
Yeah.
motto.
So there's
And if you,
programming that I this is wrong to go there. Is that right?
yeah, yeah, you're going to be like a girl. If you are going to be emotionally vulnerable, and I think so. So it does end up with the system you described, or the situation you described, where people can't access it. Guys can't access their interiority, their emotional landscape.
They can't.
So you pretty much have anger, or okay, like there's
Or nothing, or numb.
or nothing, yeah, or
There's
numbness,
numb. Like, what, I
yeah.
know you're crying. I know you're upset. What is it? Can't do it. Oh, I feel badly for that. All right. Tell us what to do. Where do we begin? What are the 5 C's, Ed? Help us out here in our 30-minute
Sure.
podcast solving
Yeah, well, thanks.
masculinity.
We came up with this 5C model. Actually, we've kind of added one since we started
Okay,
it.
6.
We're
There's
on the
going to be
we got
400
six.
by next year.
Uh, and so the 5Cs are curiosity, courage, compassion, connection. We added this contemplation one,
Ooh,
and then commitment.
okay.
And
Wow.
so shall I run through them
Yes,
briefly?
please tell
Uh,
us.
the
And maybe
curiosity
give
one,
one, if you have one practical strategy, people are going to take off their earbuds after listening and they can go do something. That would be helpful.
yeah. The curiosity one is about kind of recovering the curiosity we had as boys.
Hmm.
If I'm thinking about for men, but it's true for women too. Like, we all come with curiosity as human beings, right? We ask, why is the sky blue? How come that airplane is flying? And yet it kind of gets smushed out of us by the time we're teenagers, because, or early, young men, because you got to be the smartest guy in the room, and to ask a question is to
Makes you
acknowledge
look dumb.
vulnerability. Yeah, you might be dumb, and yet that's not flying in today's world. Like, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella says we have to go from being know-it-alls to learn-it-alls,
Oh,
because that's how fast
wow.
things are going,
It's a
right?
tweet
So,
of
and
a.
if you aren't willing to ask questions, you're going to be the dumbest guy in the room pretty quickly.
Can I just say this, that research shows that when women ask questions in meetings, men think they don't know. They don't know anything. So
Yeah.
so that's so right on, that if you ask a question, you look like you don't know. Well, that's
And
absurd.
that is, yeah, there's still going to be probably that penalty for a while, but I think things are shifting. And, and I've been lucky to be able to work with and study and interview some of the most effective leaders at these best workplaces, the ones where employees, on our Great Place to Work survey, say they're have the highest levels of trust, camaraderie, and
Right.
pride. So I'm seeing these leaders like Cisco's Chuck Robbins. He's the CEO there, and he was asking questions about race before this year. He read White Fragility, and he's asking, how can we get better as an organization around racial equity? And so it's
Wow.
having that, and that's you just ask these questions, right? And it's
Wow.
the courage piece ties directly to that, right? Because are you willing to show up as seemingly not the smartest guy in the room, or challenging some of these our assumptions that we earned everything we have, that we might be privileged, and so that that goes right against that sense that we are self-made men. We're independent. So if you start asking about privilege and how maybe you were born on third base, and you didn't earn everything you got so far, that takes courage to say, okay, maybe, there's an interdependence here, and I have to kind of take stock of that.
Can I say something here? When I think of my book, The Most Powerful You, what I saw in working with women is we need more bravery to admit what isn't working and take accountability to change it. But that's not enough. We need power, internal and external power, to be our own change agents and advocates for change. That's exactly what you're talking about. Men,
Yeah.
and I'm always talking about women, but men need to be, and bravery and power is what men are typically known for, right? Now we're asking a different kind of bravery. Admit what you
Right.
don't know and
Yeah.
take accountability for it and then have the power to shift it. That's what we're asking.
Yeah.
Same thing that you're talking about here, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of building on bravery that we men already have. This is why we see this not as an either or, but like a building. So it's the confined masculinity has all been about bravery of your physical self and your financial self. I
Confined.
will go into a burning building to save someone. I will take a big risk with my investments. But now we want you to go into the emotional realm. We
Wow.
want to ask you then also to look at self-awareness of the ways society has given you help already. So
Wow.
they're new territory, and then especially to exercise your power, like you're saying. So if you jump to this next one of compassion, once you see that maybe you have been part of a system that hasn't treated people well, you have to act on it. You got to feel with them and feel for them and alleviate that suffering and that injustice that's underway.
Can you do you
Yeah.
have any insight into why so many people, if you say Black Lives Matter, they say, no, white lives matter too. They won't go there. Of course, white lives matter. We're saying the problem is systemic racism. Why do so many people just take that issue or any other issue? Why do they resist that there's a problem? Because they don't want to feel culpable?
Yes, I think that's right. If I look at it from the masculinity lens, one theory I would have is that we are supposed to be independent, along with those other, traits we talked about before, the aggressiveness, the strength. We're supposed to be able to make it on our own. The rugged individualism. And
Yeah.
if you start saying that, we haven't had an equal set of opportunities, and we've actually had, brutal injustice around race issues, then I think our sense of ourselves as
Like, I don't want to
the
admit I had a leg up. No way.
exactly,
I did this by
exactly.
myself. Really?
and
Good
it's
grief.
complicated because a lot of, that doesn't take away from all the work people have done to get where they've gotten, but it's acknowledging that complexity, that okay, that's all true, and it hasn't been fair, so but I think it's a very challenging thing, especially when we've got people that are riling up all the divisiveness and saying, that's un-American, and we are, you know, how dare anyone call us, a racist country? It's it makes it hard to sort of like open yourself into the questioning period, and be curious about what is really going on, and how do I take responsibility, as you put it
I
as
love
well.
it. Oh, so important. What else? What else do we need here? Connection? Is that next?
Connection, speaks to that idea. If we go back to the work setting, Kathy, to like, you can't just dictate things to people anymore. It's really about, because that never really worked that well anyways. And now if you're going to be all about matrixed ad hoc teams that are working across functions, that's where the innovation happens, when we get diverse ideas in the room and diverse kinds of people from different backgrounds. You've got to be able to relate to people, and
Yeah.
not be this sort of standoff, stoic, unemotional person. If you're a leader, you have to create psychological safety, which means typically being vulnerable yourself and building a bond, a real relationship. So soft skills are now success skills, and those are about connection.
And I want to say I have a what am I saying? A virtual a team of 4, and they're contractors, and I love them all. You know, Here I am 60, and I managed a lot of things in my life and a lot of people. All of this work has uncorked in me, and maybe people will relate. When you're moving fast and you're trying to get a lot done, I'm just going to be honest and transparent. Building this kind of connection takes more time. It takes time. You have to stop. the project management. And you have to ask, oh, they have COVID. You have to ask them and be there for them and take over their work when they can't do
Yeah.
it. And it takes time. And I think people that are driven, I call them strivers in my dominant action style: striver, seeker, pacer, researcher, challenger, advocator. Strivers are all about getting it done, and that's typically masculine.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
but we are saying, yeah, this is a difference. This will be different. It'll be slower. It'll be more emotional when you really connect. What do you think?
Yes, and it will be faster in the long run. If
Yeah.
you got to slow down to go faster often,
Oh, I
which is
love
one of
that.
these paradoxes of today. But you're exactly right. Yeah, one of the other combined masculine impulses is achievement and get it done,
Right.
strivers, as you put it. And if we don't weave in some of these other what you could call feminine characteristics, but we would just call them a full human
Human, human
set
wholeness.
of features, yeah, that then you can be receptive, and that actually ties also to this idea of the contemplation. See, if I build on that, because we need to
Mm.
pause, and be still, and to access our feelings, to like settle our brain so we make wise decisions, especially in encounter intuitively in moments of great change. So I think that what you're saying is very right, and it's one of these new habits that thankfully is, with yoga, with the interest in mindful apps. It's happening more and more, and more guys are sort of experimenting with it, and they're seeing great results. I know one fellow I've met recently was the coach of the sports psychologist of the Washington Mystics female basketball team
Oh,
championship 2 years ago, and he got their players, including their star player, to start meditating all the time, 10
yeah.
minutes a day. And that brought the star players game to the next level, and they won the championship
Wow.
with his help. So when we
And
realize the power of pausing, to not just be about getting there, but being mindful of the journey, not just the destination, good things happen.
I would even add, I'll be transparent. You and I had an email exchange last night that, I could have been hurt by, let's say. Thank goodness for therapy training and having gone to therapy and been a therapist. But what I now do is pause and contemplate. Am I going to get defensive? Am I going to get hurt? Is the inner narcissist in me, I have a little bit of it, going to come flying out? It's all in the contemplation where, I always say greater awareness equals greater choice. If you don't have awareness, there's no choice. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, I love that
So
line in
we
your
need
book.
that. Oh,
Yeah, and
thank
I
you for that.
appreciate you hearing me out, and we did have a kind of a lovely but kind of
We,
not perfect, difficult exchange, if you will.
brave,
And
but a brave exchange on both our parts, I think. Right?
I agree. I agree. Um, if I could squeeze that last C in there, that's
Yeah.
kind of, it's committing to doing that, and that's what I'm about now, or trying to be anyways. And I think that's what I see in you too. Like you this with your podcast and everything else you're doing. But we can't just do this once and feel like we're
Not a
done,
one
right?
and done,
It's a
is it?
it's a muscle. These are all muscles we're building in this newer way, and often it helps to have partners along the way to help us stay committed. Um, uh, and I see more and more men's groups emerging where guys are
Mm.
holding each other accountable, but also supporting each other. I think that this liberating masculinity is on its way, even though it's still nascent.
Oh, I love it. So let's leave. I'm aware of our time here. Let's leave with two thoughts, if we could, from you. How, with the men listening, how do they know it's time to read your book and to do something to change? How will they know?
I would say that they'll be wrestling with challenges right now. How do they fit into this workplace that's now calling for men to be allies? That's now calling for a different way of leading or operating, where you've got to be communicating and collaborating. Um, if that's challenging for men, then that's a sign. Like we have some answers potentially for you.
Embrace it.
Um,
Embrace it. Don't be numb to it. Don't push it away. Say, gosh, this is a challenge. I think I have to be curious and learn, right?
and also in the personal life, if you're feeling like you're dissatisfied with your relationship with your family members, with your friends, if you're not having friends as guys, there's again, there's some potential ways to reframe things that we can offer you.
I love it. And for all the women who are living with, married to, involved with, leading, managing, collaborating with men, what can we do to help?
Think what a great question. I think if you can see this liberation of men as not a zero sum game. Like,
Mm.
we acknowledge women have greater constraints on them than men do. And men cause a lot of these problems that women experience. But when we liberate, when we help men become more liberating and freeing themselves and freeing others, everybody wins. Women win as well. So that's, I think, one piece is being open to that shift and this work that men are trying to do. But and then a second more practical thing is as men show up in different ways in your life, like maybe they are more vulnerable, maybe they are
More
uh,
walled off.
say that again.
Maybe more walled off. And instead of getting mad about it,
Right.
being
Like kind of
curious,
be curious.
kind,
Thank you. And be
gentle.
kind is it's easy, I think, for women to have bought into these notions too. That
Right.
if their guy is not suddenly going to be the devoted provider alone, and he's questioning whether he's got meaningful work, instead of just getting anxious and seeing that means we're not going to have the second car or something, like let's go there with him, or at least make space for him to start questioning
How
how he's
beautiful,
been
Ed.
as a man.
I will also say, as a feminist, in my own marriage, I saw that what I consciously thought I believed and wanted, I had unconscious biases against it. So my dad was a man's man, did all the car stuff, the yard stuff. And, when my husband, my ex now, but said, the first time we could pump our own gas, I didn't know how to do it. And I said, "Will you come with me?" He goes, "I'm not coming with you. It's really simple. You go to the pump and you read the directions. You're smart." And I was like, "What? Why won't he come pump the gas with me?" Thank goodness he didn't pump the gas for me. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
what I share is we have unconscious biases that if we brought them to light, we wouldn't agree with. But we were born with them, but you can change what you were born with. I'm going to leave you all with that. Yeah.
love it. Yeah.
Where do we learn more about you? Where do we get your book? Where do we just soak up everything you got to teach us, Ed?
Thank you, Kathy. At reinventingmasculinity.com
Right.
is where our book website is, and there's resources there. You can download our confined masculinity chapter.
Wow.
I'm also posting stuff on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. Um, and we're, I've developed a workshop with a partner on this idea of a more successful, inclusive masculinity at work. So
Wow.
if anyone's interested in that, ping me that way, um,
Wow. Oh, I
through
can't wait
LinkedIn,
to see.
say so.
Oh, how
Uh,
wonderful. I'm going to spread
appreciate
the
all
word
that.
to everybody I know. Thank you. Thank you, Ed, for sharing. Everybody hears from me about the women's issues. It's a whole world here, people, right? And we have to embrace wholeness in everyone and help that wherever we can. I can't thank you enough for taking the time and joining me, Ed. Thank you.
It was my honor. Thank you so much, Kathy.
All right, people, we want to hear from you and we mean it. Where are you struggling with this? Ed's the expert. Let us know wherever you see this. Send us a comment. And if something bothers you and perturbs you, that we want to hear that too, because that's where we're niggling the system there. We want to hear from you and we hope this is helpful to you. Have a wonderful week and we will see you next time.